Sci Sippers. Imagine a game where the person with the most points doesn't always win, where the rules change depending on where you live, and where billions of dollars are spent just to play. Sounds crazy, right? Well, welcome to the US presidential election. In the next few minutes, we're going to take you on a wild ride through a political system that's as complex as it is fascinating. You'll discover why your vote might matter more if you live in Ohio than if you live in California, how a handful of states can decide the fate of the entire country, and why someone can become president even if millions more people voted for their opponent. By the end of this video, you'll understand the US election process better than most Americans do. You might laugh, you might get angry, but I guarantee you'll be shocked by what you learn. So, are you ready to see how the world's most powerful democracy really works? Let's dive in.
The US presidential election. A spectacle so grand, so baffling and so utterly American, it makes a Super Bowl halftime show look like a quiet night in with a cup of chamomile tea. This, my friends, is not just an election, it's an epic saga of ambition, strategy and enough political jargon to make your head spin faster than a top in a tornado. But before we dive headfirst into this glorious mess, let's set the stage. Imagine a system where the fate of a nation rests on the shoulders of one person, chosen not by popular vote, but by a group of electors you probably didn't even know existed. It's like choosing your next meal based on the recommendations of a group of pigeons, unpredictable, slightly absurd, and yet, here we are. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the inner workings of American democracy, and frankly, who can blame you? We're going to break it down step by step from the primaries to the inauguration. We'll untangle the web of caucuses, delegates, and that peculiar institution known as the Electoral College. But wait, there's more. Stay tuned.
Picture this. You're at a political buffet. On one side you have the US presidential system, a hearty, standalone dish with a side of checks and balances. On the other, you have the parliamentary system, a smorgasbord of parties, coalitions, and a prime minister who answers to the legislature like a waiter taking your order. Both systems aim to serve the people, albeit with vastly different recipes and plating techniques. The US system, with its separation of powers, boasts a strong executive branch, capable of swift, or at least theoretically swift action. The president, elected separately from the legislature, holds considerable sway, for better or for worse. Parliamentary systems, on the other hand, often feature a more collaborative approach. The prime minister, typically the leader of the majority party or coalition, must constantly negotiate and compromise to maintain power. This can lead to greater flexibility and responsiveness to the will of the people, but it can also result in political gridlock or even instability if coalitions crumble like a poorly constructed gingerbread house. So, which system reigns supreme in the culinary arts of democracy? My friends, that is the million-dollar question, and like a good chef, we're not here to give you a definitive answer. Instead, we'll present you with the ingredients, the techniques, and let you decide which flavor profile tickles your fancy. Bon appetit, stay tuned. Becoming
of the free world.
Democracy in action.
Let's start with the caucus, shall we? The caucus, where neighbors debate candidates with the same passion they reserve for lawn care. Picture a Norman Rockwell scene, but with adults whispering about tax plans and healthcare reform. Caucuses are grassroots democracy, offering voters a chance for political discourse. But they're time-consuming and biased towards those with time and energy. Working families and introverts often get excluded. At least the pizza is usually free. Now, the primary, a more familiar process with secret ballots. Primaries come in different flavors, like closed and open. Voters cast their ballots, and the person with the most votes wins. Simple, straightforward, and almost civilized.
For whomever they please.
November Madness, the general election. Congratulations, dear viewers, you've survived the primaries and caucuses, but don't get too comfortable because the main event is just around the corner, the general election. This is where the political rubber meets the road. Imagine a nationwide game of political king of the hill for the Oval Office. The first Tuesday after the first Monday in November marks the day. This is American politics, where logic often takes a back seat to the Electoral College. Stay tuned.
The Electoral College, where 538 voices speak louder than millions. The Electoral College, that enigmatic group you probably never think about. This is where American democracy gets really interesting. We don't directly elect our president. Instead, we vote for electors who cast ballots on our behalf. It's like hiring a friend to order pizza for you. Each state gets electors based on its representation in Congress. Less popular states have to make their voices heard louder. The Founding Fathers created this system with compromise and fear of majority tyranny. On that fateful Tuesday, 538 electors decide the fate of the nation.
Winner takes all, except in Maine and Nebraska. Now here's where the Electoral College gets even trickier. In most states, it's a winner-takes-all system. That's right, folks. The candidate who wins the popular vote in a state, even by a single vote, gets all of that state's electoral votes. It's like winning a game of Monopoly by landing on Boardwalk when your opponent owns Park Place. A little unfair perhaps, but those are the rules. This winner-takes-all approach means that candidates tend to focus their attention on a handful of key battleground states, those swing states where the electorate is closely divided and a few thousand votes can make all the difference. Meanwhile, those states that consistently vote red or blue are often ignored, their residents' votes rendered somewhat irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. Of course, we can't forget about Maine and Nebraska, those bastions of independent thought who dare to defy the winner-takes-all norm. These two states bless their nonconformist hearts, use a proportional system allocating electoral votes based on the percentage of the popular vote each candidate receives. It's a refreshing change of pace, like finding a vegan option at a barbecue convention. Unexpected, but surprisingly satisfying. So, as the election results roll in and those electoral votes are tallied up, remember this. It's not just about who gets the most votes overall. It's about who wins the strategic chess match for those all-important electoral votes.
The Electoral College, a system steeped in history, shrouded in controversy, and endlessly debated. Critics argue it's undemocratic and outdated, ripe for reform. How can we justify a candidate winning the presidency while losing the popular vote? Proponents say it safeguards smaller states, ensuring broader campaigning. The debate is as complex as the American political landscape itself. Some advocate for a national popular vote system. Whether it remains or reforms, the debate will continue.
The election dust has settled. The recounts are over. The Electoral College has spoken. On a crisp January day, the American political machine gears up for its quadrennial spectacle. January 20th. Mark it in your calendars. It's a ceremony steeped in tradition. Imagine a sea of red, white, and blue as dignitaries, celebrities, and citizens gather.
As the clock strikes noon, all eyes turn to the inaugural platform where the Chief Justice administers the oath of office. Cue the cannons booming, the crowds roaring, the peaceful transfer of power is complete. The new president is officially in charge, ready to tackle the challenges facing the nation. There is still hope for a functional government.
Across the pond, a different kind of democracy. All right, folks, now that we've thoroughly dissected the American way of electing a leader, let's hop across the pond and explore a different flavor of democracy, the parliamentary system. Imagine a world where the head of government isn't elected directly by the people, but emerges from the ranks of the legislature, like a phoenix rising from the ashes of a particularly heated debate. Forget the separation of powers, the checks and balances, and the whole winner-takes-all drama of the Electoral College. In a parliamentary system, the executive branch and the legislative branch are intertwined like a pretzel, baked by a particularly ambitious yoga instructor. The head honcho in this setup is typically called the Prime Minister, Chancellor, or some other equally dignified title that suggests they're in charge of more than just tea time. Now, this Prime Minister isn't some all-powerful figurehead who can rule by decree like a monarch with taste for fancy hats. Oh no, they're accountable to the legislature, that gaggle of elected representatives who hold the real power in this political ecosystem. Think of the legislature as a pack of wolves, and the Prime Minister is the alpha who has to constantly assert their dominance, lest they get challenged at the top spot. It's a delicate dance of power, negotiation, and the occasional backstabbing worthy of a Shakespearean tragedy.
The Prime Minister, first among equals, sort of. So how does one ascend to the coveted position of Prime Minister, you ask? In most parliamentary systems, the Prime Minister is the leader of the majority party. Now, being first among equals has its perks. They appoint their cabinet, set the agenda, and represent the country globally.
Coalitions building governments like Jenga towers. Now, here's where things get really interesting in the world of parliamentary democracies. Coalitions. You see, unlike the US system, where two dominant parties duke it out for control, parliamentary systems often feature a smorgasbord of parties, each with its own ideology, priorities, and fashion sense. And because it's rare for one party to win an outright majority, they have to team up with other parties to form a government. Think of it as political speed dating, where parties size each other up, looking for potential partners who share their values, or at least enough of them to form a semi-functional government. These coalitions can be as fragile as a Jenga tower built by a caffeinated squirrel. One wrong move, one policy disagreement too many, and the whole thing can come crashing down, triggering a snap election and sending those poor politicians back on the campaign trail to once again endure the joys of baby kissing and awkward photo ops. Coalition governments require a delicate balance of power, compromise, and the ability to tolerate your political rivals without launching into a full-blown rant about their questionable taste in neckties. It's a system that can be messy, chaotic, and occasionally infuriating, but it also fosters cooperation, negotiation, and the art of finding common ground in a world that often seems determined to tear itself apart.
Building a government from handshakes to headaches. So you've won the election, congratulations. But hold your champagne toast, dear viewers, because the real work is just beginning. In the US, the president, with the swagger of a solo artist dropping a surprise album, gets to assemble their administration with a fair amount of autonomy. It's like picking your fantasy football team, except instead of wide receivers and quarterbacks, you're choosing secretaries of state and defense, and the stakes are slightly higher than bragging rights at the office water cooler. But in the whimsical world of parliamentary systems, and the prospect of a snap election.
Now, this whole coalition business might sound like a recipe for chaos and instability, and to be fair, it can be. Parliamentary systems are known for their potential for political shake-ups. Prime ministers can be ousted, governments can collapse, and snap elections can be called faster than you can say constitutional crisis. But this inherent flexibility is also a strength. Unlike the US system, where a president can theoretically cling to power even if their approval rating dips below the temperature of a penguin's backside, parliamentary systems are designed to be more responsive to the will of the people, or at least the will of the legislature, which is, kind of the same thing, right? If a government loses the confidence of the legislature, it's out. No impeachment drama required. This means that unpopular policies can be reversed, unpopular leaders can be replaced, and the political landscape can shift more quickly to reflect the changing tides of public opinion. It's like having a political reset button, which, let's face it, is something we've all wished for at some point during those particularly tumultuous election cycles. So while the US system boasts stability and a certain degree of predictability, parliamentary systems offer flexibility and the potential for more dynamic governance.
Term limits, the US versus the world. Speaking of predictability, let's talk term limits, shall we? In the US, the president gets a solid 4 years, barring impeachment, resignation, or alien abduction. But in many parliamentary systems, the prime minister's time is more fluid. It's like political musical chairs where the music can stop at any moment. So, who has it right, the US with fixed terms or the parliamentary world with rapid change?
Two sides of the same coin. A whirlwind tour of two different, yet similar approaches to democracy. The US presidential system, with its separation of powers and Electoral College quirks. The parliamentary system, where coalitions reign and snap elections are common. Democracy is about embracing the struggle to make any system work for the people.
The enduring experiment. Which system reigns supreme? Ah, my friends, that is the million-dollar question. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to democracy. Each system reflects the unique history, culture, and values of the nation it governs. The US system prioritizes individual liberty and limited government. Parliamentary systems prioritize consensus building and adaptability. The key is to strive to make the system more perfect and responsive. Democracy requires active participation and critical thinking. The power lies with the people to hold their leaders accountable. If this video expanded your political knowledge, don't keep it to yourself. Smash that like button and subscribe to Sci Sips for more mind-expanding content. Together, let's make being informed cool again.